In April 2026, a window opens. Not a metaphor, not a mood, not another vague promise dressed up as spirituality. A rare alignment that returns once every 84 years, and most people will step straight through it without ever realizing the door was there. But they will feel it. They may already be feeling the first tremors now. A pressure in the nervous system they can't explain. Friction in relationships that once seemed stable. The quiet failure of old patterns that used to carry them. Exhaustion without a clean cause. Or the reverse, a sharp, almost unsettling clarity, a flash of knowing that arrives too fast to name and vanishes before the mind can frame it. They will call it stress, burnout, hormones, the season changing, bad timing, random turbulence. It is not random. In April 2026, the field changes. The architecture around you changes. What astronomers track as a rare cyclical arrangement, the ancient schools recognized as a great trigon, a geometric opening in time, a moment when the distance between inner reality and outer consequence begins to collapse. In plain language, what you have been carrying in silence begins to take form at speed. This is why April is not neutral. It does not arrive asking permission. It does not pause to sort the worthy from the unworthy. It amplifies what is already present. If fear is what lives closest to the surface, fear grows louder. If stagnation has been your hidden baseline, it thickens. If you have been looping the same wound, the same avoidance, the same unfinished pattern, April can lock the circuit tighter. But for the ones who understand what is happening, for the ones willing to prepare instead of drift, this same window becomes something else entirely. A compression point, a crossing, the shortest distance between the life you have been surviving and the life that has been waiting for you to become coherent enough to receive it. The last time this gate opened was 1942. Humanity did not have language for what it was entering. No map, no framework, no conscious preparation. People walked into that threshold blind, and the world reorganized around them with brutal speed. Systems broke. History accelerated. Civilization turned on its axis. This time is different. This time, you are being warned before the field peaks. This time, the signal is reaching you early. That is why this transmission exists now, not in April, when the current is already moving and reaction has replaced preparation. But now, while there is still time to steady the instrument, because that is what you are, an instrument. And instruments are not tuned in the middle of the performance. They are tuned before the first note, before the room fills, before the pressure rises, before the frequency hits. April will open whether people are ready or not. That is not in question. The only question is what it will find in you when it does. So hear this clearly. Preparation is not optional. Preparation is the difference between being amplified by the moment and being broken open by it. The window is approaching. The field is already shifting. And if you can feel that something is changing, trust that feeling. You are not imagining it. The field does not wait. It does not negotiate. It does not arrive gently, asking whether you feel ready. It opens when it opens. And in the instant it does, it magnifies whatever is already alive inside you. Not what you pretend to carry, not what you post, perform, or explain. What is actually there? The signal beneath the surface. The fear. The static. The clarity. The buried intention. The unfinished grief. The quiet knowing. That is what April meets. And that is why this moment must be approached with seriousness. Your nervous system is not a side detail in this process. It is the instrument. It is the receiver. It is the chamber through which the signal will either distort or come through clean. And no instrument is tuned in the middle of the concert. Not when the lights are already up. Not when the pressure is already in the room. Tuning happens before the first note, or the performance belongs to chaos. So, this is not motivation. This is not aesthetic spirituality. This is not a collection of comforting ideas for difficult times. This is preparation. 3 exact protocols. 3 points of alignment. Not philosophy, not mood, not inspiration you forget by morning. Instructions for the body, for the circuitry, for the biological system that will be asked to hold a stronger current than usual when April arrives. If you are hearing this before the threshold fully opens, then understand the privilege of that timing. You are not late. There is still time to clear the noise, still time to stabilize the signal, still time to prepare your inner architecture for what is already beginning to move. And it is moving. So now we go deeper. We name what is shifting in April. We trace the pattern. We make visible what most people will only feel vaguely and call stress, fatigue, confusion, bad luck. But it is more precise than that, and it reaches further than the mind. It reaches into the nervous system, the heart, the cells, the field, around the body itself. In the ancient world, the sky was never treated as ornament. It was not scenery. It was not backdrop. It was not a beautiful ceiling hung above human life for the sake of wonder alone. It was a system of signals, a living architecture of timing, a clock, a calendar, a coded transmission field moving above kingdoms, above empires, above the private rise and collapse of individual lives. The priest astronomers of Babylon did not keep their eyes on the heavens because they were sentimental men intoxicated by stars. They watched because they understood that the sky was active. That celestial motion was not passive spectacle, but influence, pressure, pattern, instruction. They knew that when great bodies moved, conditions changed below. Modern language is only now beginning to circle what the ancients already lived in direct relationship with. Massive celestial bodies do not move in isolation. Their positions alter fields. They disturb currents. They correspond with measurable shifts in solar activity, in electromagnetic conditions, in the geomagnetic atmosphere surrounding the Earth itself. The old world read these changes through symbol. The modern world reads them through instruments. Different language, same event, and inside that field, you are not separate. This is where most people still think too small. They imagine the human body as sealed, private, self-contained, a machine ending at the edge of the skin. But your body does not stop where your skin stops. It radiates. It signals. It emits. Around you is a living bioelectric field, subtle but real, dynamic and responsive, extending outward beyond what the eye can see and the average mind has been trained to notice. And that field is not silent. It is in constant exchange with the larger field around it. So when the atmosphere shifts, when pressure changes, when the planetary environment reorganizes itself, your nervous system responds, not symbolically, not poetically, not as a metaphor your spiritual mind finds comforting, literally, biologically, electrically. The body registers what the intellect often explains, away days or weeks later. That is why certain seasons of history do not merely happen around people, they happen through them. The restlessness, the static in the chest, the sudden fatigue without an obvious cause, the sense that something unseen is moving the air around your life. These experiences are too often reduced to mood, stress, or imagination, simply because the culture has lost the language to describe the field. But losing the language does not cancel the event. The field remains. The transmission continues. The body still listens. So no, this is not superstition dressed up in dramatic tones. And it is not mysticism for people who are afraid of reality. It is reality at a level most people were never taught to perceive. The ancients encoded it in temple systems, star calendars, and rites of timing. We encode it in data, measurement, and signal analysis. But underneath both is the same uncompromising truth. You are not outside the field. You have never been outside it. You are living inside an atmosphere of forces, rhythms, and invisible exchanges, and your nervous system is continuously reading that environment, whether your conscious mind knows it or not. That is the first thing to understand before April. The sky is not decoration. It is an active text, and your body is already reading it. Now, we name the movement, not the mood around it, not the commentary, not the watered-down version made safe for people who only want inspiration without consequence. We name the force itself. Uranus is completing its transition into Gemini. If you speak astrology, you already know the weight of that sentence. If you do not, then strip away the symbolism and hear the mechanism. Uranus is the breaker of structure, the disruptor, the voltage spike in the larger pattern. Wherever it moves, the old arrangement stops holding. Systems that looked permanent begin to crack. What was fixed becomes unstable. What was hidden in the wiring gets exposed by pressure. Uranus does not politely improve existing forms. It interrupts them. It destabilizes them. It forces evolution by making stagnation impossible. Its cycle is slow enough that most human beings experience it as a generational event, not a passing mood. Uranus takes roughly 84 years to make one full orbit around the Sun, and every time it enters a new sign, it spends years there, working the structure from the inside, rewiring the field in slow, relentless waves. Now it is entering Gemini, and Gemini rules far more than casual astrology has trained people to think. Gemini governs information, communication, signal flow, perception, language, pattern recognition, mental processing, the entire nervous system architecture through which reality is received, interpreted, sorted, and transmitted. Gemini is not just thought. It is the circuitry through which thought travels. It is the speed of the relay, the quality of the signal, the way the mind and body metabolize input from the world. The last time Uranus entered Gemini was 1942. Look at what followed. Radio surged into dominance. Computing infrastructure took form. The mechanics of rapid transmission changed civilization at the root. The external world accelerated. Information began moving faster than societies were emotionally or morally prepared to hold. Entire systems reorganized around speed, connectivity, and the increasing compression of distance. That was not random history. That was the field expressing itself through matter. But 2026 is not a repeat. It is the next octave, because this time the revolution is not centered in external machines. This time, the pressure is moving inward, into the body, into the neural network, into the human instrument itself. The change now is not only technological, it is biological. The very hardware through which you process life is being pushed toward a new operating speed. This is why so many people feel like something is wrong when, in fact, something is changing. Your system is taking on more input than it was trained to stabilize. The stream is faster. The signal is denser. The volume of information, emotional charge, psychic noise, environmental stimulation, and internal activation is coming in at a pace the old nervous system was never designed to manage cleanly. And the body tells the truth long before the mind catches up. You may already know the symptoms, even if you have not had words for them. Wired, but tired. Not a little tired. Not ordinary fatigue. A very specific contradiction. The body depleted, the mind still lit up. Exhaustion in the limbs, but no real descent into rest. A racing internal current that refuses to switch off. Sleep that doesn't restore. A system that feels simultaneously overclocked and underpowered. Then the cognitive glitches. The strange inconsistency. 1 hour, everything is sharp, elegant, connected. Insight arrives whole, clean, almost luminous. The next hour, the signal is gone. Fog, blankness, delay, as if something in the relay has stalled mid-transmission. Not stupidity, not failure, interference. Then, sensitivity. Noise feels invasive. Light feels harsh. Crowded environments become strangely hostile. The ordinary world starts arriving as too much data at once. You walk into a room and feel the room before you think it. You absorb tone, atmosphere, undercurrents, fragments of tension that earlier versions of you might have filtered out automatically. The system is no longer screening input the way it used to. And then, the older material starts rising, patterns you thought were finished. Emotional residue from years ago, sometimes from childhood, sometimes from relationships, losses, disappointments, humiliations you believed had already been processed. Old grief, old fear, old identities. They return, not because you are regressing, but because the increase in voltage is pushing hidden material back to the surface. Pressure reveals what has not yet been integrated. This is the part most people misread. They think the resurfacing means they are getting worse, less stable, less evolved. They think the sensitivity means fragility. They think the exhaustion means collapse. They think the sudden swings between clarity and fog mean they are failing to keep up with life. No, this is not a moral weakness. It is not evidence that you are broken. It is not proof that your inner work failed. It is what happens when a new level of current begins moving through an older system. And that run a more complex program on outdated hardware, and the machine does exactly what the body does now. It slows, it heats up, it freezes, it glitches under load. Not because the machine is worthless, but because the demand has exceeded the architecture it was built to carry. That is the nervous system for many people right now. A system under acceleration, a receiver flooded by new volume, an old configuration trying to handle a stronger field with yesterday's settings. And this is why the coming threshold matters so much. Because Uranus entering Gemini is already a rewiring event, already a pressure event, already a demand for adaptation. But in April, another pattern locks in around it. Something that does not merely accompany this transition, but intensifies it. April does not create the shift from nothing. It amplifies the shift that is already underway. It sharpens it, accelerates it, makes it impossible to ignore. So, if life has felt strange lately, too loud, too fast, too exposed, too electrically charged for no obvious reason, do not rush to pathologize every signal. Do not reduce every symptom to personal failure. Some of what you are feeling is structural. Some of it is generational. Some of it is the body registering that the field has already begun to change. And in April, that change becomes harder, cleaner, and far more consequential. Because Uranus is not arriving to comfort the old self. It is arriving to end its monopoly. And what enters next will determine whether this rewiring becomes chaos in your system or initiation. The Great Trigon. In April 2026, a structure forms in the field that does not appear often and does not arrive quietly. 3 planetary bodies lock into a near-perfect triangle in the sky, what astrologers call a grand trine, what the older Hermetic schools named with more gravity, the Great Trigon. That name was never ornamental. The ancients understood that geometry is not merely visual. It is energetic. It is structural. Form determines function. Pattern determines behavior. And in the language of sacred geometry, the triangle is the first completed act of stability, the first sealed form, the first shape that can hold pressure without collapsing under it. 2 points create a line. A line can shift. A line can swing. But 3 points establish a plane. 3 points create support. 3 points make something that can bear weight. That is why the most enduring civilizations encoded the triangle into stone, ritual, architecture, and initiation. Egypt did not build upward in that form by accident. The alchemical schools did not speak in triads because they were fond of abstraction. They were describing a law. When 3 forces enter right relationship, instability gives way to transformation. Not symbolic transformation, structural transformation. That is what the Great Trigon signals. In April, the field takes on a triadic architecture, a 3-pointed energetic configuration in which movement no longer scatters in 10 directions at once, but begins to organize around coherence. The old alchemists would have said that under such a pattern, transmutation ceases to be merely possible and becomes inevitable. Something locked begins to turn. Something latent begins to take form. What has been hovering as potential starts moving toward embodiment. This is where people make the mistake of hearing language like this and assuming it belongs to metaphor alone. It does not. What this means in practical terms is severe in its simplicity. The distance between inner state and outer consequence begins to shorten. The lag narrows. The buffer weakens. The slow delay that usually exists between what you repeatedly hold in consciousness and what eventually takes shape in your lived reality begins to collapse. That collapse is the event. In modern language, people reach for phrases like quantum collapse, the movement by which a field of probability resolves into one concrete outcome. A range of possible futures remains fluid until attention, observation, intention, and energetic charge narrow the field. Then, the wave folds. The possible becomes the actual. The unseen becomes specific. What had many directions suddenly has one. In ordinary time, that process can be sluggish. There is friction in the system, noise in the field, contradictory thoughts, divided will. One part of you intends, another part doubts. One part moves forward, another part rehearses fear. The emotional body sends one signal, the language says another. And because these frequencies conflict, manifestation drags, results delay. The field receives a mixed transmission. Most people live there. They want one thing, expect another, fear a third, and unconsciously rehearse all three at once. That is why so much in ordinary life remains muddy, delayed, half-formed. But April is different. Under the triadic field, the drag reduces. Not because reality becomes sentimental, not because the universe suddenly turns generous, but because the architecture itself becomes more conductive. The field stabilizes around amplification. The signal clears faster. Probability organizes more quickly around charge. Things move with less resistance between the subtle and the visible. And this is where the warning must be heard with absolute clarity. The field does not care whether the charge inside you is called hope or fear. It does not sort your contents into moral categories before amplifying them. It does not reward only what you consciously claim to want. It responds to intensity, to repetition, to coherence, to what is most alive, most rehearsed, most emotionally electrified within you. Whatever holds the greatest charge in consciousness is what gains momentum first. If clarity is strongest, clarity takes form faster. If devotion is strongest, openings gather around it. If fear is strongest, fear begins building architecture. If resignation is strongest, stagnation hardens. If an old wound remains the loudest signal in the system, the field may organize around that wound until it is finally impossible to ignore. This is why April is not neutral. This is why April cannot be treated like an aesthetic concept, a pretty spiritual mood board, or another month to see what happens. Something will happen. The only real question is, what signal will be strongest when the field sharpens around it? Because the triadic field does not merely reflect thought, it responds to embodied thought, charged thought. Thought fused with emotion, repetition, physiology, and belief. What you casually think once has little force. What you hold, feed, fear, rehearse, and return to over and over again begins to imprint the field around you. And under April's architecture, that imprint gains traction quickly. This is why your nervous system matters more than your preferences. This is why your body matters more than your slogans. This is why the next 30 days are not background time. They are calibration time. If your inner environment is full of static, then April can amplify static. If your system is chronically braced, April can magnify bracing. If your attention is fragmented, your results may fragment with it. But if you reduce noise, regulate the system, clarify intention, and bring the body into coherence, then the same field that destabilizes the unprepared becomes catalytic for the prepared. That is the split. For one person, April feels like acceleration into chaos. For another, it feels like a door finally unlocking. Same month, Same sky, different signal. So understand the scale of what is being said here. What you do with your nervous system now is not a side note to the event. It is not self-care as decoration. It is not a soft supplement to a larger cosmic process. It is the process. Because when the great trigon forms, the field becomes less forgiving of contradiction, less buffered, less delayed. The distance between what is within and what appears without narrows with unusual force. And in that kind of architecture, preparation is not superstition. It is strategy. The triangle is forming. The field is stabilizing. The drag is thinning. And whatever in you carries the greatest emotional voltage is already moving closer to form. So do not ask whether April will amplify. Ask what, exactly, it will find amplified in you. But pause for a moment and stay with the number. 84 years. Why 84? Why does this window return on that rhythm and not another? Because 84 is not only an astronomical interval, it is a human one. Uranus takes roughly 84 years to complete its orbit around the Sun. Yes, but 84 years is also, within the margins of nature, the span of a full human life. One biological cycle, one generation, carried from birth to death, one entire arc of memory, labor, inheritance, and release. That is not a trivial detail. And in the older world, it would not have been treated as one. The ancients understood this as law. Every 84 years, the baton passes. One generation completes the pattern it was born to hold. Another steps forward to carry what could not yet be finished. The field changes hands. Not just the planetary field, but the psychic field, the cultural field, the invisible architecture through which human consciousness organizes itself in an era. The configuration resets. The old signal fades. A new one rises. Now think about 1942. That generation did not know, in real time, what they were preparing. They were not standing inside history saying, "We are building the nervous system of the future." They were simply responding to pressure, to acceleration, to the demands of their moment. And what did they build? Radio, computing, signal infrastructure, external networks, machines that could send information farther, faster, across greater distance than ever before. They built the outer circuitry of civilization. And then they handed it forward to us. We are the continuation of that pattern, but not in the same form. Uranus in Gemini in 1942 pushed the world toward external communication at revolutionary speed. Uranus in Gemini in 2026 pushes that same revolution inward, into the body, into perception, into cognition, into the living system itself. We are not the generation tasked only with building faster machines. We are the generation being asked to become one. That is why the language emerging over the last 30 years matters. Neuroplasticity, biological coherence, heart-brain synchronization, the measurable effect of intention on physiology and behavior. These are often dismissed as soft ideas because people hear them through spiritual language and fail to see the harder truth underneath. The human system is more rewritable, more electrically responsive, more trainable, and more interconnected than previous eras had the tools to prove. We are the proof. We are the technology the last cycle was constructing toward. So in April 2026, you are not merely witnessing a planetary event in the sky above you. You are standing at the completion point of an 84-year human arc, a transfer point, a threshold in the long handoff between generations. The world of 1942 built the hardware for communication across the planet. April 2026 asks whether we can communicate with that same speed and precision within ourselves, through the nervous system, through the heart, through the field of consciousness we carry into reality every day. That is the real upgrade. That is the deeper assignment. And that is what it means to be alive at this particular moment in history. Across civilizations that never shared a border, never shared a language, never sat at the same table of history, the same instruction appeared. China, Egypt, India, different temples, different symbols, different words for the invisible. And yet each arrived at the same conclusion. When a great transition approaches, rigidity becomes a liability. The vessel must soften before it can hold a stronger force. The mind must open before it can receive a higher order of signal. The Taoist masters spoke of formlessness. They looked to water not because it was weak, but because it could not be broken by the rules that govern rigid things. Water yields, and in yielding, it overcomes. It enters any shape without losing its nature. It outlasts stone not by force, but by refusing to become fixed. The Hermetic alchemists taught the same law in another language. Before transmutation, dissolution. Before gold, the breaking apart of what was too dense to change, the fixed must become fluid. The hardened structure must loosen. Nothing truly transforms while it is still gripping its old form. The Vedic sages carried the same transmission through yet another doorway. Become vast, they said. Become still. Become like the open sky, because when the inner field is no longer crowded by contraction, something greater than ordinary thought can begin to move through it. 3 traditions. 1. Preparation. And that preparation is not abstract, it is biological. It is nervous system work. It is the conversion of the human instrument from a rigid container into a clean conductor. That is what April requires. Your mind cannot meet this threshold by clenching harder. Your nervous system cannot meet it by overthinking, overanalyzing, overreacting, or trying to control every incoming signal. That is the old architecture. That is resistance pretending to be intelligence. The system being asked to receive more cannot remain armored in yesterday's settings. It must become a superconductor. You already understand the metaphor. A regular wire carries current, but not without cost. Energy is lost along the way. Heat builds. Signal degrades. Resistance turns transmission into strain. But a superconductor moves current with almost no loss, no drag, no waste. The signal arrives intact. That is the shift. What keeps most human beings from functioning this way is not lack of desire. It is resistance in the system. Stress, chronic anxiety, tension rehearsed so long it begins to feel like personality. The body held in a permanent, low-grade state of defense. This is not just being overwhelmed. It is sympathetic activation. Fight or flight running in the background even when no visible danger is present. A nervous system that has forgotten how to stop scanning for threat. And in that state, the signal cannot come through clean. Everything gets distorted. Intuition becomes panic. Sensitivity becomes overload. Perception becomes reaction. The system is receiving, but not coherently. It is picking up the field through static. The opposite of that state is coherence. Coherence is not passivity. It is not numbness. It is not pretending to be calm while the body is secretly braced. It is measurable alignment. Heart and brain operating in rhythm instead of conflict. Physiology no longer fighting itself. Signal no longer tearing itself apart on the way through the body. When coherence comes online, perception sharpens. Decisions become cleaner. The body stops wasting energy on internal contradiction. This is the state April favors. Those who enter April in chronic sympathetic activation will experience the month as pressure, confusion, and psychic noise. But those who prepare the body for coherence will experience the same field as opening, acceleration, and revelation. Same threshold, same sky, different instrument. And there is one pathway in the body that governs much of this shift. The vagus nerve. The ancients knew it without naming it in modern anatomical terms. They encoded it in symbols because symbols were the language available to them. In mystical systems, it appeared as the descending channel, the sacred axis, the column through which higher intelligence enters matter. In Egyptian imagery, it was the stabilizing pillar, In Eastern traditions, the central current. Same structure. In the body, the vagus nerve runs like a living corridor from brainstem to throat, to heart, to lungs, to gut, binding the major systems into one conversation. When it is active, the body exits survival mode. Recovery begins. Heart rhythm steadies. Stress chemistry lowers. The brain becomes more capable of learning, adapting, rewiring. Perception becomes less reactive. Choice returns. When it is suppressed, everything narrows. You live in defense. The body stays on alert. Old patterns fire faster than new solutions. You do not respond. You repeat. This is why the vagus nerve matters here. It is not a side note. It is the biological antenna for what is coming. The more regulated it is, the more clearly you can receive the field without being scrambled by it. And what does this nerve connect to most intimately? The heart. Not the heart as metaphor, not the heart as romance or sentiment. The heart as intelligence. The heart as organ of perception. The heart as source of signal. Modern neuroscience only began catching up to what older systems insisted for centuries. The heart is not merely pumping blood. It is participating in perception. It is sending information upward. It is shaping mental and emotional reality from below. This matters because the age we are entering will overwhelm the thinking mind if the thinking mind remains on the throne. Under Uranus and Gemini, under acceleration, overload, endless signal, algorithmic reality, collapsing attention spans, the prefrontal mind alone cannot hold the volume. This is why so many people feel fog, fatigue, hypersensitivity, fragmentation. The receiver in the head has been turned up too loud. The heart operates differently. Its field is broader. Older traditions knew this through ritual. Modern language reaches for other terms: coherence, bioelectric signaling, entrainment. But the deeper truth is simple. The heart reads what the mind cannot sort quickly enough. It knows by resonance before the intellect knows by analysis. And when the vagus nerve is active, when coherence is established, the noise in the head quiets enough for that deeper intelligence to come forward. That is the real preparation for April. Not becoming smarter, not becoming louder, not forcing more thought through an already overdriven system, but shifting the seat of intelligence from the frantic mind to the coherent heart. That is the sacred center. That is the true receiver. And that is the doorway the next phase will require you to enter through. This is what the 3 protocols are designed to do. Not entertain you, not inspire you for an hour, and leave your life untouched by nightfall. They are designed to alter the state of the receiver, to prepare the body not in theory, not symbolically, but in practice for what April is going to demand. And yes, after planetary fields, generational cycles, sacred geometry, and the mechanics of inner collapse becoming outer reality, the first instruction comes down to something almost disarmingly simple. Your mourning. That is not a contradiction. That is the law. Because the deepest shifts in consciousness do not begin in grand gestures. They begin in repeated conditions. In the architecture of daily behavior, ancient traditions knew this long before modern neuroscience had the language to confirm it. Transformation enters through ritualized repetition. The small gate opens the large one. You do not change the signal by obsessing over the signal. You change the instrument that receives it. And right now, your nervous system is that instrument. More specifically, it is an overloaded instrument. Too much input, too many interruptions, too much borrowed thought moving through the mind before your own signal has had a chance to rise. Notifications, headlines, opinions, fragments of panic, manufactured urgency, endless feeds designed to keep your attention in a low-grade state of activation. Each one may seem small on its own. By the end of the day, you call it fatigue. But often, it is not fatigue alone. It is saturation, an instrument flooded past clarity. And the April signal, subtle, consequential, easily drowned out by noise, cannot enter a system that is already crowded with everyone else's voice. A quiet frequency cannot be recognized in a room full of shouting. A precise instruction cannot land in a vessel already contaminated by static. This is why the first pillar is silence. You begin 2 weeks before April, not eventually, not when it is convenient. Before the threshold opens fully, before the field intensifies, before your reactions start disguising themselves as intuition. Each morning, claim 1 hour that belongs only to you. Before the phone, before the news, before the feed, before the world enters and starts naming reality for you. 1 hour of silence. You may sit, walk, drink coffee by the window, write by hand, breathe, look at the sky. The form matters less than the condition. No screens, no incoming content, no other people's language entering the system before your own signal has had a chance to surface. The Egyptian initiates treated this hour as sacred because they understood something most people have forgotten. What comes first enters deepest. The first atmosphere of the day sets the tone of the field. Protect that threshold, and the rest of the day begins to reorganize around a different center. Protect yours. And then, one more instruction. Just as necessary. Look honestly at your life and identify the 3 things that drain you most consistently. A conversation, a type of content, a place, a habit, a person you leave feeling smaller around, a stream of information that leaves residue in the body. For 2 weeks, cut each one in half. Not forever, just long enough to clear the vessel. Because silence is not emptiness. Silence is preparation. And the clearer the vessel, the cleaner the signal when April arrives. The second pillar is grounding, and this one cannot remain an idea. It has to become physical, immediate, felt in the body, not merely understood by the mind. Because when new force enters a human system, it must have somewhere to land. If it does not descend, it rises, it floods the head. It turns into agitation, racing thoughts, false urgency, spiritualized anxiety. The person becomes uncentered, oversignaled, disconnected from the body while trying to interpret everything through the mind. That is already happening to many people, and in April, it intensifies. This is why every serious tradition, Taoist adepts, Tibetan practitioners, Egyptian temple initiates, arrived at the same law from different directions. When the current increases, the root must deepen. Energy without grounding becomes noise. Sensitivity without grounding becomes chaos. Expansion without grounding becomes fragmentation. So do this now. Do not stand. Do not adjust everything. Stay where you are. Close your eyes. First, feel the fact of your body, not the idea of it. The fact of it. Feel where you are being held. The weight of your body against the chair, the floor, the bed, whatever is beneath you. Feel the points of contact, the pressure, the gravity, the simple, undeniable truth that your body is here. Now bring your attention to the soles of your feet. If they are touching the floor, feel the floor fully. If they are not, imagine the line between your body and the ground beneath the building, beneath the room, beneath everything that appears solid. Do not analyze. Just feel. Now breathe in for 5. Hold for 5. Exhale for 5. Again. 5. Hold. 5. Release. And once more. 5. Hold. 5. Down. On each exhale, let something leave through the legs. Not dramatically. Just let the excess descend. The static. The pressure in the head. The unnamed tension. Let it move downward instead of upward. Now allow an image to form. See a warm gold current rising from the earth below you. Not harsh, not theatrical. Slow, steady, ancient. It rises through the ground, through the floor, through the soles of your feet, and begins moving up through the legs with deliberate calm. The earth has its own field, its own pulse, its own stabilizing intelligence. You do not need to create that connection. You are inside it already. You are only becoming conscious of it. Let that warmth gather in the lower belly, 3 fingers below the navel. There, not in the head, not in the chest. There. The old traditions placed the center there for a reason. Because that is where the system steadies. That is where scattered energy becomes weight. That is where the body remembers how to hold itself from within. Take 3 more breaths. 5 in, hold for 5, 5 out. With each exhale, feel that lower center becoming warmer, heavier, more anchored, more real. You are not trying to float above this moment. You are building a root beneath it. Because when April begins to accelerate, you will need a still point inside the movement. And remember this, the tree that survives the storm is never the one with the prettiest branches. It is the one that learned how to go down before it tried to reach higher. 1 final breath. 5. Hold. 5. Then open your eyes and notice the difference. The third pillar is the most important one. Intention. Because there is a law beneath all manifestation, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Reality responds to attention. In physics, this appears in the observer effect, the simple but devastating fact that what is being watched behaves differently from what is not. Attention is not passive. It alters outcome. It organizes probability. It participates. The ancient Hermetic schools said the same thing in older language, as within, so without. What is held inwardly does not remain inward forever. It presses outward. It takes shape. It becomes structure, circumstance, pattern, event, and in April, that movement accelerates. The interval between inner signal and outer consequence shortens. The lag collapses. What has been living in you quietly begins to move toward form with unusual speed. That is why this moment is not casual, and that is the warning. The field does not distinguish between desire and fear. It does not ask what you meant to amplify. It amplifies what is strongest. Whatever is loudest in your field becomes more influential. For many people, that loudest signal is not vision. It is anxiety, a private dread around money, a buried conviction that nothing ever really changes. The old program beneath the personality, the sentence running under everything. This is not for me. People like me do not get breakthroughs. People like me do not get love, peace, restoration, expansion. That signal, if left unchallenged, becomes instruction. This is why entering April without intention is not neutral. It is exposure. The field will not choose for you. It will magnify what is already charged. So choose. Not 10 desires, not a scattered wish list. One area of life where change is no longer optional. One threshold you are willing to name. One decision you are ready to stop postponing and write it not as longing, but as declaration. Not, I want more money, but in April 2026, a breakthrough opens in my financial life. Not, I want love, but in April 2026, I enter a new level of real, mutual connection. Feel the difference. A wish is soft. A wish disperses. A declaration organizes. It tells the body that a line has been crossed. The nervous system hears certainty differently than longing. It begins to gather itself around what has been named. Heart and mind start moving in the same direction. The signal becomes cleaner, more coherent, more believable to the system carrying it. That is the real shift. So every morning, during your hour of silence, speak your declaration out loud once, slowly, clearly, with full presence, especially in the 7 days before April and the first 7 days within it. Let the words stop being language and become orientation. The alchemists did not beg for gold. They prepared the vessel, created the conditions, and applied intention with precision. You have the vessel, you have the conditions, and the window is almost here. Now, name what you are carrying into it. Because in April, what is declared with coherence does not remain abstract for long. Before we close, there is one thing this transmission has to say plainly, because most voices in this space will not. April is not gentle for everyone. Even those who prepare may feel the pressure of it. Even those who enter the threshold with awareness may still be asked to pass through a dismantling. And it would be dishonest to speak only of breakthroughs and openings without speaking of the clearing that often comes first. Every real upgrade begins with disruption. When a system undergoes a deep update, it does not simply add the new and leave the old untouched. It scans. It flags. It strips away what can no longer run under the next architecture. Corrupted files are exposed. Obsolete functions fail. The machine may slow down before it stabilizes. Sometimes it freezes. Sometimes it appears to break, when in fact, it is making room. April may move through your life in the same way. A relationship that once fit may suddenly feel impossible to carry. A job you kept out of obligation may lose all internal meaning at once. A role you have been performing for years, competent, familiar, socially acceptable, may begin to feel false in your own hands. You may feel an urge to end something without being able to explain it logically. You may feel sleep disrupted, energy altered, the body strangely sensitive, the mind less willing to tolerate what it used to endure. And the danger is that you may mistake this for collapse. It is not necessarily collapse. It may be the old form losing coherence. The alchemists had a name for this phase, the blackening. The moment when what was stable begins to dissolve, not because the process has failed, but because transformation has finally begun. Before the new structure can hold, the old one must loosen. Before the next form can crystallize, the previous one must stop pretending it can contain what is now arriving. This is not punishment. It is not evidence that you did something wrong. It is not the universe withdrawing support at the very moment you started to move correctly. It is the field clearing what cannot travel with you any further. But here is the distinction that matters. Not everything that shakes should be abandoned. There is a difference between release and reaction. Between something ending because its time is over, and something being destroyed because fear made the decision too quickly, under pressure. That is why the three pillars matter so much. Silence, grounding, intention. They are not only for receiving what April may open, they are for staying stable while the clearing happens. They are your anchor when the weather turns, your root system when the wind hits the branches. So if something begins to tremble in April, do not rush to force it back into place. Do not assume every disturbance is a disaster. Ask the deeper question. Is this structure being released? Or am I trying to escape something I still need to face? If you have prepared, you will feel the difference. And remember, the tree with deep roots does not panic when the storm arrives. It lets the storm reveal what was dead, strip what was brittle, and clear what could no longer grow. Then, when the air is still again, it rises stronger than before. In April 2026, a window opens. Not forever. Not casually. Not in a way that can be postponed until life feels more convenient. It opens on an 4-year rhythm, and most people will pass through it the way people pass through the most important moments of their lives. Half awake, underinformed, sensing the pressure but missing the meaning. Some will feel nothing and call it ordinary time. Others will feel the shift, the strange acceleration, the inner pressure, the sense that something invisible is rearranging the architecture of their lives, but they will have no language for it. They will dismiss it, rationalize it, move past it. And then, the window will close. The pattern will seal. And the next opening will not come again for another 84 years. But you know now, and that changes the entire equation. Because once a threshold is seen, you are no longer just crossing it. You are meeting it, consciously. For a long time, the human nervous system has been organized around survival. That setting was necessary. It got people through rupture, conflict, scarcity, and generations of compressed fear. But a survival setting cannot guide you through a recalibration. It can only defend against one. And April is not asking for defense. It is asking for alignment. This is not the beginning. It is not the end. It is the threshold. The ancient Egyptians understood threshold moments with a seriousness modern people have almost completely forgotten. Before initiation, before passage, before any major transition in the temple cycle. The initiate was required to stand at the gate and make a declaration, not to impress the priests, not to persuade the gods, not to perform holiness for an audience, to declare to themselves who they were choosing to become on the other side. Because the deeper truth is this: you do not discover who you become after transformation. You decide before it. Then the field responds. The field is not sentimental. It is not random. It is not a machine dispensing outcomes based on wishful thinking or vague deserving. It is a mirror, precise, exacting, increasingly responsive. Under the triadic pressure of April, it reflects back the architecture you are carrying within you. Nothing more, nothing less. So the question is not whether April will return something to you. It will. The question is, what are you bringing into it? Because that is what determines the return. And now, before you leave this transmission, do one thing. Write your declaration. One sentence. Not a wish. Not, I hope. Not maybe. Not someday. Write it as a threshold statement. In April 2026, in my life, and then name what you are choosing. A new career, a financial breakthrough, a healed body, a deeper peace, a relationship that finally becomes real, a version of yourself you are no longer postponing. Be specific, be clean, be decisive. Why does this matter? Because the moment you write it, you stop standing outside the event. You stop watching from the edges. You become a participant. You set the frequency before the field fully opens. That was the ancient method. They did not beg. They did not bargain. They declared. So scroll down, write the sentence, set the signal, and understand this clearly. You are not alone in this window. The archive remains open. The transmission is still moving. We'll see you on the other side.